Okay, everybody, welcome to The Hard Sell with me, your host, Joel Stevenson. And for those of you joining us for the first time, the idea of the show is whether or not you work as a salesperson, we all end up selling things, sometimes ourselves, sometimes other things like our company or our car. And so, knowing more about sales can always be useful. And our goal is to help you win when sales opportunities or sales problems present themselves by bringing leaders in the field together to share what works and what doesn't. Today, we got a great guest from the sales leadership side of the house, Sean Dazet. Sean brings over 20 years of experience on everything from business development, sales, partnerships, running sales and CS teams. And right now, Sean is the senior VP of sales and customer success at JazzHR. Prior to that, Sean has been the chief revenue officer at Square 2 Marketing. He's been a principal sales manager at HubSpot's agency partner team, and has done it all, managed massive partnerships with the likes of AMD and Walt Disney, and is really passionate about leveraging technology to improve all aspects of business, including sales. And so with that, Sean, welcome to the Hard Sell.
Thanks, Joel. Pleasure to be here.
Great. Well, maybe just to sort of kick us off here, why don't you just tell everybody a little bit more about JazzHR, and if there's anything about your background that I missed that's important, feel free to share that as well.
I think you got the background. There's a smorgasbord of things that I've done over the years, but it's all centered around really sales, marketing, customer engagement type of stuff. JazzHR, we are an applicant tracking system really focused on the SMB space. So we provide a really nice user-friendly piece of technology that helps you to source and screen and ultimately hire the right applicants for whatever type of position you're filling. We are very excited. This year has been a big one for us. We actually merged with a couple other organizations this year to form one big conglomerate. So we merged with JobVite, which is really a slightly broader applicant tracking tool set aimed a little bit upmarket from us. And then we also merged with Next Thing RPO, which is a top-notch recruitment process outsourcing company. So we really have it kind of covered across the market for technology as well as services for all your hiring and recruitment HR needs.
Okay, great. Yeah, that's exciting. It's an interesting space. We'll maybe talk a little bit more about it in a bit as it relates to competition, but I know there's a lot happening there, and certainly with the current market dynamics, it's maybe never been more challenging to acquire the talent that you need to grow your company, and so I'm sure everybody is looking to try to get as good as they can in those areas. So maybe let's start by talking a little bit about selling into the talent department of a company, and you've sold into various different parts of an organization over time. Maybe just talk to us a little bit about what's unique about selling into a group that's sort of responsible for trying to attract and acquire talent into an organization.
Sure. There are certainly unique pieces to what the function of, an HR manager, a recruitment professional, an HR director, the role itself and the responsibilities are unique. But, often regardless of the focus of what somebody does at a company, selling them a piece of technology boils down to understanding a couple key things, right? You want to understand, first of all, what their goals are. Why are you looking at a piece of technology? What is important about this? What's going to be, success? What's going to equal success for them as an individual? What's going to equal success for the organization itself, right? What's going to make that investment a positive investment for them? So goals are super important. The challenges that they're facing right now. So When somebody comes to look at JazzHR, right, more often than not, they are facing a challenge of it's hard for us to find people to hire, right? Or our current technology doesn't provide the right level of collaboration for our team to properly evaluate and vet a candidate or something like that. So we really have to understand those two components to sell to anybody, right? And figure out where they are within the organization as well to ensure that we're meeting the needs of a CEO at a small business versus an HR director at a medium-sized business are going to be a little bit different, right? And the priorities are going to be a little bit different in terms of how they want to have the conversation. So while we want to understand specifics to the HR space, right, around how they measure success and around what type of roles they're trying to fill and everything like that, regardless of the product that you're selling, particularly in B2B and software sales, right, you ultimately want to understand what are the goals and what are the challenges, right? And then what are your future objectives that you want to ensure that the software you purchase today is going to still support and scale against. So there's a lot within it, but there's commonalities across sales in general that are important. Within HR, right, it's about addressing the things that might be critical to an organization. Things like helping them to consider the competitive landscape and how they're going to position their open jobs, things like helping them consider how they're going to eliminate bias and things like that. It's really important across, I think, most spaces and all spaces. It should be important across all spaces to support diversity, inclusion, and equity right now. So, helping to understand or helping them to understand how important that is and showing them how your solution can help to support that is really how we build the relationship and the trust with the folks who are going to ultimately move forward with JazzHR, with JobBite, with services, and frankly, throughout my career with almost any piece of technology that I've been selling.
Yep. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. And that's well said. One question, maybe to follow up on that, since you mentioned that your target is SMB businesses, I imagine that in many cases, you're sort of showing up to an organization that maybe hasn't invested in systems before, or maybe all of a sudden they're scaling and they're realizing that either whatever, like they're sort of having to get to another level of productivity in terms of talent acquisition to go do some of the things that they want to go do. And I wonder, I'm curious about the scenario where you get somebody inside of that group, whether it's the person running HR, whether it's maybe somebody that's running recruiting, or maybe it's just an individual recruiter that realizes that there's a need for technology, but then sort of needs to go sell it upwards into the organization. Like, maybe talk to me a little bit about, like, is that a common thing that happens? And if so, maybe talk me through, like, how do you help that person build a business case to then go sort of push it up further in the org?
Yeah, it's actually extremely common, particularly in the size of organization that we work with. You've got a lot of folks who wear multiple hats within a company, and one of those hats might be talent or recruitment, and they realize that the scale at which they need to operate is bogged down and it's not possible using manual methods, right? So what you want to really focus on there is core functionality. So, why does somebody move forward with a platform like JazzHR if they've never been using an applicant tracking system before? Well, it's a volume approach, right? It's so much easier to write a job description inside of JazzHR and send it out to multiple job boards instead of going through and doing this manually one by one. So right there's time savings. And if you can help them to think about that type of equation, how many activities are you doing to recruit one person to your company? How long does that take you on a manual basis, right? If you're doing it through email and actual posting on individual job boards versus doing it with ultimately a few clicks, especially if you're recruiting for the same position over and over again. So you help them to kind of build business cases around that type of stuff. If we're going to save 8 hours a week, right? Well, what does it really cost the company if they have to pay someone to be doing work for those 8 hours? And how can we reallocate that productivity against additional goals that the organization has? So you often have to find the ways in which they're spending their time and help them to somewhat quantify that to build essentially an ROI on purchasing a piece of software like JazzHR. I think you also have to look at their success in finding the right candidate and hiring that candidate. You might put a job posting out there and you're getting 50 applicants and 5 of them might be qualified, right? So if you start to dig into some of the historical challenges they've had around filling roles and how long it's taken to fill roles, and then we look at some of the data of folks that are using JazzHR. Plenty of case studies and all that type of stuff are available that really show an increase in productivity and ultimately speed to hire, which is so critical, now in particular, but really in any labor market for that matter. So we've got to find ways that we can show a quantifiable impact on the business, and we really want to work with that internal champion, and any sales rep needs to work with their internal champion to build the metrics-based case that they're going to then present upward. I would also say try to do it with them. As I always tell sales reps, if you arm your champion and let them go into battle, so to speak, without you, they may not succeed as well as if you were right there to support them. So ideally, you're having that conversation together because a good sales process is a collaboration, and we should be there to collaborate and support the conclusions that the internal champion has come to, and also to demonstrate any specifics within the product because we know it and we can speak to it a lot more effectively than someone who's just starting to get to know a platform like JazzHR, or for that matter, any piece of software.
Yep. Yeah, I imagine it's one of the things that I wonder about at sort of a macro level in your industry as you're trying to bring people along. It's almost like if you were to look at the impact of sort of digital technologies in various sectors of the way a company operates, it seems like marketing was kind of up front, is sort of leading the charge on a lot of this stuff, years and years ago as digital ads came to the sort of the forefront. Then, those of us in sales, like we maybe came along a little bit later. And HR is like maybe somewhere along the same lines as sales, where it's like it's largely a digital activity now. And I imagine that the talent teams that produce the best results are pretty good at understanding the digital mediums that are available and how to sort of quantify those and use them to their advantage, just like a digital marketer is. And since you have a little bit of background in both, I'm curious if you find that to be true, and how does that maybe present itself in the sales process?
Sure. I think you're 100% on point. Nowadays, no core function within a business exists by itself, right? Like it is one story, and it's one story across marketing, sales, talent acquisition and development. It's the same story really. And it's the brand message that you're putting out there. I know plenty of buyers at companies, big and small, that even if the product is right, if the company doesn't have a cultural, a culture that they agree with, right, they're not going to move forward with that. And that is continually a reality of the decision makers that exist today and the decision makers that are coming up and will be driving all purchases over the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, right? So it is a cohesive story. It's a through line from who you say you are within your marketing to the way that you sell, to the way that you engage with your employees, right? It's a cultural through line. And we have a lot of different ways through our platform to put digital ads out there and all that type of stuff, right? Because it's the same story, right? If you're going to work for an organization, you're going to look for however they advertise that position, and you're going to look for a brand awareness factor for that organization. So, the smart talent departments out there are really working in step with their marketing departments, right? And there's a marketing to HR alignment in the same way there's a marketing to sales alignment that's happening within organizations. So I think you're completely on point about the evolution for sure. I think HR is following a little bit in terms of how they acquire technology and utilize technology and how they utilize digital mediums. But the important thing is that, as I've said a couple times, not to be redundant, but it is all about a cohesive story for an organization to truly attract both your buyers as well as your talent.
Yep. Yeah, makes a lot of sense to me. I maybe just switching gears now a little bit. You'd spoken a little bit about kind of the way that that you're trying to go to market, and you I believe largely go to market through reps. And in the ATS space, or even the broader recruitment space, seems pretty dynamic in the sense that you have a lot of players, a lot of technology, and it's one of these ones where maybe almost like real estate, it seems to sometimes swing from like a buyer's market to a seller's market in terms of applicants versus companies having more power. And so I imagine from a rep's perspective, it changes a lot. And I'm curious about how, in the context of sales management or sales leadership, like how do you figure out who's going to be a good rep, or who are your best reps, and like what are some of their characteristics and qualities, and how do you find those qualities, how you nurture those qualities? Let me just expound on that a little bit.
Yeah, good reps. What I look for when I interview somebody is first of all a display and a degree of intrinsic motivation. If you are not strongly motivated internally and have intrinsic motivation, I can teach you anything, right? But I can't teach you to care. And having made some misses in my career of hiring people that were a little more apathetic, that seem to have skills but really don't have drive, they're never successful, right? So I always try to look for people that are highly motivated and have a lot of intrinsic motivation. I look for effective communication. So I can certainly fine tune, and any good sales manager and sales leader can help to fine tune the way someone communicates, the intentionality within the communication, right? But it's a heck of a lot easier if you bring somebody in who, from the very beginning, can express complex ideas and assert their thoughts and opinions and beliefs around those complex ideas. And so you have to look for ways to test for that within your interview process, right? Are you motivated? Can you communicate effectively with me? And do you have some degree of a past history of success? That success might not always be a one-to-one equation, right? I've hired plenty of people who have never sold software before, but they've displayed the right degree of success in project management, in in-person manufacturing sales or something like that. And you bring them into software and you ensure that you teach them the product properly, you teach them the value proposition properly, and they will excel. So a lot of it is about that communication factor. Do they want to be successful? And do they want to be in sales for that matter? You look for those core things and you can teach a lot of people the rest of it. How to demo, how to close, right? How to do a good discovery call, all those fundamentals that have to be taught there. So underlying characteristics is really what you're looking for there. It boils down a lot to work ethic, frankly, too, which is, really that intrinsic motivation. And the people that are successful are working a high volume of opportunities, and they are not stopping, and they're not taking things personally if they lose a deal. You lose about as much as you win in most sales. So you have to be prepared for that, and you have to have the mental fortitude to handle that, right? It's hard to test for all that within an interview process, but by asking a lot of questions, I always ask candidates, tell me about a deal you lost, tell me about a deal you won. And I look for lessons within both of those, right? Because you want to see how they reflected on a win, how they reflected on a loss, And you want to make sure that they're learning something in both cases because both have valuable lessons.
Right. Right. Yeah, absolutely. And since you also oversee customer success, do there's sort of this long-standing debate, among sales leaders about, kind of the hunter versus farmer mentality and like how far do you go either way. Those qualities that you described for a salesperson, would you put the same qualities on a customer success hire, or would you change them somewhat? If so, how?
Yeah, in some respects, I think I would put a lot of the same stuff on there, but I'm looking a little bit for, if you think the hunter farmer thing, I'm looking a little bit more for the farmer mentality when I'm talking to a customer success manager, when I'm talking to a candidate for that role, excuse me. So, motivation, effective communication, absolutely. But I really want someone who's interested in methodically analyzing and solving problems, right? Not all salespeople want to methodically solve problems. They want to tackle obstacles and they want to leave them behind, right? Good customer success folks want to actually break a problem down. They want to ensure it's solved and that it's not going to come back up again, right? They're not looking for a quick win. They're looking to create sustainable, positive change. So there's a little bit of a different mentality there. There's a little bit of a different speed at which those two roles tend to go in. So certainly looking for similar fundamental qualities, but different when it gets to almost how they execute against the tasks in front of them.
Right.
That said, good salespeople, and they come in many different flavors, tend to be extremely collaborative about the way that they sell, right? As I said earlier, a good sales process is a collaboration between the sales rep who wants to display value and sell your product and the prospect who wants to understand value, solve problems, and make a good decision, right? That's a collaborative process. And so a CSM should take the same kind of collaborative perspective. And sometimes you've got really great crossover. I know we have some great sales reps on our team who were CSMs, right? So, it's you can jump from one to the other, but some people skew hard into one or the other because of the way they want to sort of approach what they consider a success.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good framing about long-term sort of problem solving. I guess I guess it ends up being the case that not all software works perfectly out of the box, believe it or not. So that's good. That's good wisdom there. Maybe one last question here before we. But before we ask if there's any other questions from the audience and sign off. But so your category, I suppose, like many software categories, you had mentioned earlier that there's been some strategic activity with your company trying to reposition in a market. But it seems like every week I'm seeing somebody roughly in the talent space raising some enormous amount of money, and so I've got to believe that there's a lot of noise coming at your current customers and also the prospects that you're targeting. Maybe just talk a little bit about how you coach your reps to differentiate in a space that's quite competitive.
Sure. The end of the day, a lot of software does similar things. Speaking specifically about JazzHR rather than JobVite, which is part of the family, but not my focus on a day-to-day basis, JazzHR has a competitive edge in the fact that we are a product we know exactly what we are, right? We have built this from the ground up to address the needs of small to medium-sized businesses when it comes to sourcing, when it comes to screening, and when it comes to hiring, right? So our features and functionality, the bang for the buck that we pack into this thing really gives us a competitive edge in the vast majority of situations. And the fact that all of this is built with the idea of smaller businesses in mind, small to medium businesses. We have a lot of larger companies that utilize JazzHR, but the bread and butter is the SMB market. And You have to really just understand your prospects' needs, understand their concerns, understand what their goals are, and align them to the software solution. People buy, as much as I hate saying this, people buy for irrational reasons. And so, our job is to bring as much rationality to the conversation as we can, but it's also ultimately to be a good partner to our prospects and ensure that we highlight where we're a fit for them. And frankly, we highlight where we're not a fit for them. And that's an important part. The way you sell can be a bigger differentiator than what ultimately your product does. We happen to be in a very comfortable position where our product just happens to kick a lot of butt and be dead on for the folks who need it, right? But at the end of the day, I don't want my reps to spend a bunch of time selling against a competitor. What I want them to do is focus on ensuring that JazzHR addresses the needs of the prospect, because that's when it's a good fit. And that's when the whole thing works better for everybody when they buy. And that's when folks, stay with us for 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years, whatever the case might be. So certainly there's a lot of noise out there, and there always will be, and it's only going to increase, right? But the important thing is to focus on making it easy and frankly making it safe for your prospect. You have to remember that the people who are buying from us, people who are buying from any of you, they're ultimately just other people who are trying to make a good decision for their organization, right? And so if we can partner with them around that and help to show them why it's a good decision, they're going to move forward with JazzHR regardless of what, shiny feature a competitor set might have.
Yeah, well, I could certainly say that's that is a good long-term business practice in the sense that it is so painful to change ATSs
Yes,
that I think going in with an approach of like really trying to do a consultative sale and get the best get the customer into the best solution for them is going to be better long-term. And I think you're probably in a unique position to appreciate that, having sort of responsibility for both sides of that trade. So if you end up doing a bunch of bad deals on the front end, that ends up causing problems later on. So
for sure, you watch all the metrics and you got to be careful. But you're absolutely right. What you want to do is help people to solve their problem and not just get a flash in the pan, so to speak, right? It's about a sustainable system that you can utilize, you can grow with. And so that's what we're trying to help people to figure out when they're talking to us.
Yep. Yeah, it's great. Okay, well, that's going to be it for my questions. I'm just going to pause here briefly and see if there are any questions from the audience, and if there is, to make some sort of do whatever emoji appeals to you, and we'll bring you up on stage.
Joel, Zoe has a question. She typed it out though, if you want to read
it out. Do you want to read it, or I can bring Zoe up? You want it? I'll bring Zoe up. Okay, go ahead.
Zoe said, love the conversation. Would be curious Sean's take on the shift we've seen over the past, say, 5-ish years of talent recruiting people being taken more seriously as a high impact strategic function of a business. How have you seen HR technology like ATSs support and evolve with that shift? Thanks for the insights.
Sure. So I've been in the HR space for about 2 years. So the evolution from 5 years ago, I've got insight into, but not the most extensive. I will say that what I've seen and what I've experienced in my career is that the organizations that really grow and scale and do it in a way that's effective, that retains both your talent as well as your customers, they are really prioritizing the culture and the HR partnership across the business, right? So we've got HR partners for our business units. And it's so important because there are a myriad of things on a day-to-day basis that you need HR support for, right? It's a bunch of people. Ultimately, it's a bunch of strangers initially coming together to figure stuff out, right? So HR has grown in its responsibility from just, bringing people in and assuring that, you're hiring and you have benefits, to really, I think, partnering and helping organizations to develop their leadership strategies and to really develop cultures that foster growth and foster employee retention. Now, how that's evolved from a technology perspective is, I think you've gotten more tools on the market, more integrations. JazzHR integrates with 150 plus technologies, right? And a lot of those are around screening and assessments. You can try to narrow down who you're talking to and ensure their cultural fits by using screening tools and things like that. So I think that's the key, is the technology evolves around the needs to, weed out the folks who may not be aligned to the mission of the organization, in addition to the culture of the organization.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I think we certainly feel similarly at Yesware. And on the assessment side, I got to give a shout out to my friends over at Predictive Index as one of the other places that's available. So, Sean, thanks so much for spending some time with us today. If people want to learn more about JazzHR, or they want to get in touch, what's the best way to do that?
JazzHR.com. You can learn all about us. And I'm a terrible person who doesn't do a lot of social media, but you can always find me on LinkedIn. So check us out, though. We're happy to work with you if you have any ATS needs, of course. And JobBite and Next Thing RPO are part of the family. So reach out if we can do anything for you. Joel, thanks. This has been a pleasure. Always happy to chat about sales and how the world's evolving.
Yeah, great. Thanks for being with us today.
All right. Take care, everybody.
Okay.